So a few months ago, I got a 4x8 Laguna CNC machine for the shop. And since then, I've been having so much fun learning the world of CNC, learning its abilities, and creating so many fun projects on it. So in this video, I want to go over a little bit about my experience, as a new CNC operator, and also 7 different projects that I've created on it. The CNC shows up on a truck, all pre-assembled and wrapped up tight. I did have to run a piece of equipment to get it off the bed, and man, it was pretty intense watching my brand new machine just creeping slowly through the air to get to the porch. But it made it there safely, where I unpackaged everything that I could before picking it up once again and moving it to a corner of my shop. Now, I've been using a smaller iconic CNC for the past 2 years, and while it's been great, I want to cut more than what the size will allow. And that's what got me looking into 4x8s. I went with the Laguna Swift model. This is a vacuum bed, meaning you can put the bed under suction and hold the material in place. It's amazing to have the capacity to throw an entire sheet of plywood or even 8-foot dimensional lumber on the bed and then just let it cut. Now, for those of you concerned that my videos will be changing because of this addition, don't be. I still plan to make videos building things by hand like I always have. But when I come into a project that I either want to repeat or make a template for, or I have an idea but it would simply take way too long to do by hand, that's when I'll turn to the machine. The very first thing I decided to make was a simple shop stool. At the time, the side of my shop was extremely bare, so I spent 20 minutes quickly modeling up something. Since I know SketchUp so well, I pretty much do all of my modeling there to start. You could do it in one of the other modeling softwares though, or even in VCarve itself. Once the parts are as I want them, I move and rotate them so that they're on the same plane. I choose a standard camera setting to give me a direct top-down perspective to the parts, then turn on parallel projections under the camera setting. In this setting, instead of all the points disappearing to one point on the horizon, they're just nice and parallel in both 2D and 3D, which gives you a nice flat image to export. Now I can export it as a 2D graphic and choose the .dxf file type. Next, I can open up that DXF in VCarve, route the toolpath for it, and then cut it out. And then, just like that, I have a very simple but functional stool. I really feel like CNCs are a modern day printer for thought. It was exciting and crazy to me as I assembled and sat on this first stool of mine that my butt was actually sitting on something tangible that was only a mere thought half an hour before. You can see I was so excited I didn't even bother going to the ground to do the assembly work. I just sat right there on the bed. The next stool was a much taller design to populate seating over in my woodworking shop. I actually have a video showing how to do these without a CNC if you're interested. I made one of these by hand and then used the CNC to batch out the rest quickly. Then the third stool design I did when Christmas rolled around. There was going to be 14 nieces and nephews at Christmas, so I cut a stool for each child and also cut in their first initial onto the top. I did leave them raw, but then I took a bunch of paints and everybody in old clothes spent the afternoon in the yard with the kids helping to paint their stools. It was a huge hit, so if you have an event coming up with some youngins involved, feel free to download the free DXF and take a unique gift. The next project is a plywood dead blow mallet, because why not? I made this from quality Baltic birch, and I only had 1/2 inch on hand, so I made multiples of the parts to stick together and build up the thickness of the mallet. Oh, and to show you how well the vacuum on the table works, this is Robert trying with all of his weight to move the sheet after laying it down and turning the table on. Then you can also see how well the vacuum holds these parts into place while they're being cut. On these, the holes were placed to act as locators and keep these parts in line with one another as they were being assembled. Then a pocket is cut in on the head so I have a void to place BBs in, and therefore making it a dead blow mallet. I used Type-On Original on the different layers, smushed them together, and then inserted a dowel into place. Then I flipped it over, and before attaching the other side the same way, I filled the pocket with BBs. After setting those up in some Bessie quick clamps to dry, I did all of the final sanding and rounding over by hand. As you can see, the mallets have gotten a little more complex with text on both sides. I love this project so much, I actually turned it into a branded product. So if you would like one, there is a link for you down below. Project number 3 is a bottle cap display in the shape of all 50 states. It's a simple project where a person can collect bottle caps from different beers and then have a way to put them on display. Sometimes moving around a full sheet of ply is difficult, but I found that by placing my stack of sheet goods at the end of my CNC, I can simply slide a new sheet off the stack and onto the bed. I also always check to see if there is a slight cup in the material as I'm laying it down. If so, I make sure to place it so that the cup is facing down. Since sheets typically have a prettier front than back, when I do this, I make sure to take my designs and reverse the image in V-carve before cutting them out. When doing something like this job, I first go through and cut all of those inside pockets throughout the entire sheet. Then I come back and cut the profile. Also on jobs like this, even though I have a vacuum table, I typically go ahead and add tabs to the pieces because every hole I cut in allows air to escape, therefore reducing the effectiveness of the vacuum table. Oh, and here on the Michigan, you can see a dark line running through the veneer on the back side. This is just an example on why reversing the image is helpful. Then here you can see a little bit better that the holes have a unique shape to them. They aren't actually perfectly round. By having a hole that has about 4 grab points, it allows the caps to have a small variation in size, but still be compressed into the state. They can simply be pushed in from the back by hand, or the cap can be set down and then the state can be pushed in over it. It's my favorite, Ziegenbock. Good old Texas beer. If you get one, don't try to fill it up in a single day, unless you have a party. Then that's acceptable. All right, let's talk about dust collection for a second and a few modifications I've done to improve things. Is it raining? First off, I'm using the Laguna Seaflux dust collector, which has this really awesome foot pedal to raise and lower the collection canister. It has 3 intake ports where originally I only used 1 to run over to the spindle, but I also wanted to use the collector to clean off the bed after each project. To do this, I first added in a blast gate to the spindle line. Then I added in another blast gate to the second port, where I bought and attached another 4-inch flex hose that I could then run over to a Rockler shop vac attachment. I think Rockler specifically designed this to clean up large areas such as floors. So it works perfectly to clean up the entire CNC bed quickly. I threw 2 hangers on the wall to store it off the ground and so that it would be close to the work area. Now I can close the vac off to the spindle and direct it only to this attachment and then very quickly go over the entire bed before laying down a new sheet of plywood. This ensures that nothing is left behind to get under the material, which of course would throw off all my cuts. Alright, now on to project 4. If you've been around for a while, then you might remember that my neighbors have a lot of chickens. In fact, I built them a massive chicken coop. If you don't know, fresh farm eggs actually don't have to be refrigerated. With that, I made a countertop egg holder to hold a full 24 eggs. This one cracks me up because of how cute it is, but better than just being cute, it's also functional. After designing it in SketchUp, then exporting it to V-carve, I cut it out. Another tip for you on useful things to have around the machine, one is an extension cord. I personally installed a cord reel that can be pulled out to use and then retracted when done. And even though you can play with feed rates and RPMs to get a nice cut, I still run over the parts quickly with my Palm ROS before removing them. Then when I use tabs, I use my multi-tool to cut them out. And just a tip, whenever you're placing your tabs, pick spots on the part that are nice and flat so that you can cut them off flush, and then that cuts down post-production cleanup work. On my first batch of chickens, it's a double-sided design meant for sitting on the countertop. You can see that I did a slot design where after painting each tray, it could slip right around the body of the chicken and rest on 2 support pieces. My mom died when she saw them, but said that she didn't have enough countertop room for one and would need one that hung on the wall instead. With that, the one-sided egg holder was born. Since the slot is out of the question, with it not having a back, this one has a mortise and tenon design, where the trays fit very snugly into slots on the body of the chicken. Since they are such a good fit, I made sure to tape them off before painting. This one might be my favorite. over the double-sided one. If you can't tell, I'm kind of in love with the egg holder. Oh my gosh, this is so cute. I love this one. Oh my goodness, I love this one. Let's switch off of wood for just a second with project 5. My main goal with the CNC is to do more production work behind the scenes, either outside of my videos or in conjunction with them. An example of that is whenever I built a porch swing. I made a video building it by hand and showing viewers how, but now I also sell templates for people who are interested in speeding up the making process of their own swing. I personally think the making of these templates is so interesting. I first lay down a sheet of masonite, but really any flat sheet will do. Then I lay on top of that a sheet of styrene, which is just a plastic material. Now, the cool part is I switch out the bit to something called a drag knife. Honestly, it looks just like a small X-Acto knife. And when it runs, the spindle doesn't turn like it does with every other bit. So instead of spinning and moving through the material to cut, it simply drags the blade along the tool path you dictate and rotates the blade so that it's always in a cutting direction. Another thing, instead of cutting all the way through the material, it just pierces it. So that whenever a full sheet is done, you have to go through and bend/tear them out. Carefully, mind you, because the material can stray and tear in the wrong place. Oh man. It helps to first bend the piece in along the cut and then run your hand or nail along it to guide that tear. This is a really great material for making templates for projects that have a really unique shape in them. They can be set directly on a piece of material, traced, but then set aside until they're needed again. All right, project number 6, and it's back to wood, making a growth chart ruler. Now, everything I've cut up to this point has been from sheet material. When I was figuring out how to make these, I decided to make a jig to hold 1x8s on the bed of my machine. I started off with a sheet of 1/8" plywood, then cut down some 3/4" plywood scraps, 2 different lengths, and attached it using Titebond 2. I would set a 1x8 in place, use a square to make sure it was sitting there at a 90, and then block it in on the other side with another scrap. And total was able to fit 6 1x8s. I transported the jig over to my CNC and lined it up onto the bed. Of course, dimensional lumber is not all exactly the same size, so once in place, I used some wedge material to fill in the small gaps if they wiggled around, making sure to dress the board off to the left of the space. I made sure to keep these wedges short so they wouldn't interfere with the spindle or bit. Now I could start the cut and watch as all 6 boards would be cut at the same time. I have a special fondness for these rulers because I've made over 100 of these by hand when I first got into building. These are actually what I made and sold to buy all my first tools and materials for the first year of my projects. So if you want to make one, yes, of course the CNC makes it quicker, but you can very easily do it with the router as well. In fact, I have a video already showing you how to go that route if you're interested. Okay, last but not least, because it's my personal favorite, project number 7 is a variety of shop charts. This started off by me making a fraction to decimal conversion chart, because getting into CNC, you use decimals over fractions, and I got tired of always Googling the conversions. Although, a tip for you, if you work in VCarve, if you only know the fraction, you can type that in, then hit the equal key, and it will convert it for you. Anyways, I made this chart to hang up by my CNC for quick reference. And then it just snowballed. And I got carried away with making many others that would be helpful or just fun to have around. My second one was a tap and drill size chart because even though I have one hanging on my shop fridge, it is freaking tiny. You have to get this close to it to read, and I ain't got time for that. But I do have a machine where I can make my own size chart that I can read at a glance. For all of the charts, I'm using a wide variety of V-bits. And honestly, there was a huge learning curve on these because depending on the material and the size of font determines what bit to use and how fast you can run it. I started off with a ton of blowout and had to do a lot of tests before diving into a new chart to determine the speed and also the depth to get the best results. My favorite chart is more of just a fun one. It is a custom Jenga scale. If you're not familiar with Jenga, it is the hardness scale for woods. The only problem is most charts out there have woods that I've never heard of, much less use. So I created my own list of species that I thought the average woodworker would find useful. Now on the rulers, you saw that I just spray painted it and then sanded off the overspray. On these, I tried a different method. They do make products that you can first paint your piece of material, then mask it off before cutting in your engravings. I tried 2 different products while prototyping these charts, and honestly, I didn't have much success with either. So instead of messing with it, I would cut the charts, spray paint the engravings, then using a foam roller, come back and paint the background. And this actually came away with great looking results. Then it just left the difficult job of figuring out a good looking but legible color scheme. I know I'll get a lot of comments because of the big controversy around CNCs. You know, whether you consider it real woodworking or not, it is most definitely within the niche of making, and that is where my passion lies. So I'm having a blast with it. There's so much to learn, and I cannot wait to explore it further. Now, if you're looking for an at-home resource to learn CNC, then I recommend this book, which is CNC Router Essentials. Other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this one. I know it was longer than normal, but hopefully you came away with some good ideas. I'll see you on my next project, guys. I want to say a big thank you to this video sponsor, which is Molecule. Molecule is a complete reinvention of the air purifier, which replaces 70-year-old technology. Imagine if your phone was the same as it was back in the 1940s. That's exactly when the technology you're using to clean your air was developed. Molecule has introduced a breakthrough science backed by the EPA that is finally capable of destroying air pollutants at a molecule level, eliminating things like allergens, airborne chemicals, and destroying pollutants 1,000 times smaller than HEPA filters can even capture. I spend a lot of time in my shop where I'm constantly around sawdust, metal dust, paints, and finishes. So I love how sleek and compact Molecule is with a handle on top so I can easily transport it to whatever station I'm currently working at. I've even been putting it in the bedroom at night where I can tell a noticeable difference in the way I can breathe and therefore sleep. Molecule's technology has been personally effective and verified by science, but most importantly, it's been tested out by real people. I'm very excited to have Molecule as an addition to my shop. If you would like to add one to yours or to your home, then I have a code that will give you $75 off your first order. You can visit molekule.com and enter the code April at checkout.